Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello dear students. Today we are going to have a discussion on relationships among the dimensions of learning, and this is the second part of our discussion on dimensions of learning given by Marzano. I am Dr. Aerum Khan, Assistant Professor at IASC, Faculty of Education, Jamia Millia, Islamia, New Delhi. So in the previous part of dimensions of learning video, we have seen the Marzano's view on dimensions of learning. And in the present discussion, we will see how the dimensions work together in the form of a model and what are their uses in the teaching learning process. So first, let us have a recap of Marzano's dimensions of learning. We have seen that Marzano has given different dimensions, and there are 5 dimensions which are given by Marzano. So we will just see one by one those dimensions. The first dimension given by Marzano is the attitudes and perceptions. So what exactly Marzano means by attitudes and perceptions? Basically, attitudes and perceptions belong to the effective teacher's understanding that all teaching and learning activities are filtered through students' attitudes and perceptions. So we can say that effective teachers understand that all learning activities are filtered through students' attitudes and perceptions. So this was the first dimension. Then the second dimension is knowledge application. According to this knowledge application dimension, effective teachers help students to acquire new knowledge by encouraging them to relate new knowledge with what they have already known, and by providing them with opportunities to organize information in ways that facilitate learning. So whatever is previously understood by the learners, or on the basis of the previous knowledge attained by a student, we actually constitute the new knowledge. So new knowledge actually is based on the premises of the previous understanding and previous knowledge. So this is the second dimension. Then the third dimension, which is extension of knowledge. Effective teachers help learners to refine and extend their knowledge by providing opportunities for them to use higher order thinking skills. So this is the third dimension, which actually talks about the higher order thinking skills. Then the fourth dimension is using knowledge in a meaningful manner. So effective teachers involve students in long-term self-directed projects that require investigation, decision-making, research, problem solving, and intervention, so that they can use whatever knowledge they have acquired in a very meaningful manner for their further studies. So this was the dimension number 4. Then the fifth dimension says it actually is stated as habits of mind. So in this case, effective teachers help students to avoid impulsive actions and develop sensitivity to feedback, desire for accuracy, and persistence in the face of difficulty. So these 5 are the dimensions which were mentioned or which were given by Marzano. So like all these 5 dimensions work together, and they work in a very orderly manner. And here in this particular discussion, we will see that in which way Marzano has given a kind of model in which all these 5 dimensions actually work together. So we will see how it happens. basically, if we want to check the relationship among the dimensions of learning, it is very important to realize that the five dimensions of learning do not operate in isolation, but they work together in a manner in which they can be actually in like they can work in a way where one is actually facilitating the other. So there is one model, one diagram through which all these dimensions relationship has been shown. So we will just see that what exactly this dimension like model of dimensions of learning is actually looked alike. So you can see here that this particular circular diagram is shown, and if we just go and analyze this diagram, we can see that it shows that all learning takes place against the backdrop of learners' attitudes and perceptions, which is the first dimension, and their use or lack of use means that if they are not using that particular skill, in that case productive habits of minds are actually produced, which is the dimension number 5. So if students have negative attitudes and perceptions about learning, then they will likely learn little. If they have positive attitudes and perceptions, they will learn more and learning will be easier. Similarly, when students use productive habits of mind, these habits facilitate their learning. So dimension number 1 and 5, you can see here in this diagram, um, actually are always factors in the learning process. This is why they are part of the background of the graphic, which is shown here in this figure. So you can see that dimension number 1 and 5 are actually outside the circles. When positive attitudes and perceptions are in place and productive habits of mind are being used, learners can more effectively do the thinking required in the other three dimensions. That is, acquiring and integrating knowledge, which is the dimension number 2, extending and refining knowledge, which is the dimension number 3, and using knowledge meaningfully, which is dimension number 4. You can notice the relative positions of these circles of dimension number 2, 3, and 4 here in this diagram. So we can just make a statement that the circle representing meaningful use of knowledge subsumes the other two, and the circle representing extending and refining knowledge subsumes the circle representing acquiring and integrating knowledge. You can see here in this diagram. So this communicates that when learners extend and refine knowledge, they continue to acquire knowledge. And when they use knowledge meaningfully, they are still acquiring and extending knowledge. In other words, the relationships among these circles represent types of thinking that are neither discrete nor sequential. They represent types of thinking that interact and that, in fact, may be occurring simultaneously during the learning process. So, we can say that it might be useful to consider the dimensions of learning, a learning model, as providing a metaphor for the learning process. Then dimensions of learning offers a way of thinking about the extremely complex process of learning so that we can attend to each aspect and gain insights into how they interact. If it serves this purpose, it will be a useful tool as we attempt to help students in their teaching and learning process, in the process of their like gaining the learning which is actually expected from them to acquire. So now let us come to the uses of dimensions of learning. So we can say that as a comprehensive model of learning, dimensions can have an impact on virtually every aspect of education, because the major goal of education is to enhance learning. It follows that our system of education must focus on a model that represents criteria for effective learning, criteria that we must use to make decisions and evaluate programs. And although dimensions is certainly not the only model of learning, it is a powerful tool for ensuring that learning is the focus of what we do as educators, as teachers. It should validate current efforts in schools and classrooms to enhance learning, but should also suggest ways of continuous improvement, how a teacher can actually improve herself or himself continuously. So if we try to make an analysis of all those dimensions, we will get to a kind of conclusion that what are those capabilities, what are those things which we can acquire, we can learn from the dimensions and make ourselves a better teacher. So the uses of dimensions of learning are actually many more which are stated here. So as a teacher, we have to actually make an analysis and just think about that how we can make our teaching learning process much more effective in a way that we can make our students much more interested in the classroom. So this was uses of dimensions of learning. So with this, we are now at the final part. We are now going to summarize this particular model. We have seen that how the different dimensions of learning go hand in hand, which is explained by Marzano in the form of a model, and what are their uses in the teaching learning process. So in the next video, we will discuss the Bloom's taxonomy of thinking skills to understand more effectively the whole concept of dimensions of learning, because Bloom has given actually a different perspective in terms of cognition and in terms of thinking, in which in a way that we can understand much more properly these dimensions. So to have another aspect of basically the dimensions of learning, we have to go ahead with studying Bloom's taxonomy of thinking skills, which we will be studying in the next part of the session. I hope that you all have understood the points covered in today's lecture. I hope to see you again. Thank you so much.